Hello pedestrians, this is McGarren Flack. Just going to go over high key and low key and also the differences between the two, and then I will demonstrate how to actually paint a low key painting. Not low key as in like low key, but low key, K-E-Y, like separation, space, hyphen, either way. All right, off to the rights here. I have a value scale. This is value 10. This is value 0. It follows the Munsell system, 0 through 10, 10 being the lightest or whitest, and 0 being black. Now, technically, in painting world, you won't ever get to a value 10, and you won't ever get to a value 0. You will be able to get to a 0.5 value, and you will be able to get to a 9.5 value for the whites. But that's about it. So let's talk about the still life. This is the still life that I will be painting. This is a full value still life. I have multiple objects. I have different colors on it, and I'm going to show you the difference between high key, low key versus full value. So this is full value. If I shift over into high key, notice that the value, the darkest value, is about a value 5. Now, I know that there are 11 value steps here. There's 5 above value 5 and 5 below value 5, but this is the true value 5 or middle value 5. So if I come over and I color pick this nice little dark value here, look at where it sits on the triangle. This left side of the triangle is the values. The right side is the chroma. So if you look here, it's located right in the middle. And I color pick that, that's value 5, okay? If I go over here to value 5 and I select it, it's pretty much the same exact spot. If I go to this darker value that's up here, where the black usually was located, that's value 5. So your darkest value will be a value 5. Your lightest value will be, if I select this one, it's all the way up in the top. If I select this value, it's a little bit darker than that edge, but this is the lightest light, or the whitest part of the whole entire still life. The white plate is not as white as the reflection here. So reflections are always going to be the specular highlights. Specular reflections are going to be lighter than whatever the white object is. Even if the white object is white, you got to make it darker so that the specular highlight will pop forward. The color becomes a little bit more muted. So if I select this color, do you see how it's closer to the gray side than it is to the chromatic side? It is lighter in value, but it is more chromatic. When you get into these darker values, it can shift into a higher chroma, but usually it doesn't. It loses its chroma. All right, so that is high key. Now, if I shift it and go to low key, this value, the lightest value in here, again, I selected this, so I'm going to go over here, select the lightest value, and look at how dark it is. So dark because it's about relationships of values. If I color select this value 5, you can see it's right there in the middle. And if I go back to this highlight and select it, it's a little bit darker than the value 5. If I color select this value, see how it's almost pure black? Even the shadows in some of these areas are going to be pure black, right? There's pure black. The edge of the canister is going to be pure black. This is going to be pure black. So pure black areas are going to be down here in value, and then you're going to slowly creep up into those lighter values, but be careful not to reach value 5 too quickly. You have to save that for your highlights, for all of this to be able to make sense. Another thing that I want to point out, look at how, again, the chroma has shifted. It's a little bit more chromatic because it's darker in value, but it is, again, closer towards the grays. So whenever you take something out of its native value and shift the value structure down, it's going to lose chroma. Or if you shift the value up, it's going to lose chroma. So don't be so worried about getting the right chroma when you're doing high key and low key. The focus is value. So keep your high key in this value section and keep your low key in this value section. Last thing, posterizing. When you start to work on your paintings, instead of painting all the little details, I see too many students jumping in here and they start painting the little stem of the apple and they're trying to render it out. And they're like, why doesn't it look right? It doesn't look like a stem. How do you paint a stem? Oh, this glass, it doesn't look like glass. How do you paint glass? Instead of doing that, I would recommend squinting down. What squinting down does is it simplifies the forms and it posterizes your shapes. Here, I've just selected a posterization. If I click on the posterization of it, if I select here on posterization for the properties, I'm at 8 different levels. meaning it's going to take 8 different levels per object and divide it up. If I drop this down to 2 levels, look at how it simplifies the light shapes from the shadow shapes. All of the shadow shapes are one value. Look at this glass object. It totally disappears. Look at the metal object. Totally disappears because it considers all of these midtones in shadows. Same with this, but the opaque objects, you have a light side and a shadow side. Separates it from lights and shadows. If we go to 4 values, you still get that separation of light and shadow, but it's compressed. The values are compressed. Look at the metal object. Here we have the highlights, the midtone, and then almost all of this dark value is the same thing. It's really, really dark. Same thing with the glass. Look at the glass. I mean, there's like highlights that are coming off to the side here and the side there, and the background's getting distorted, and subtle little value changes that are in the base of it. This stopper at the top, it's just shadow shape and light shape. Very, very simple. So when you squint down, this is what you should be seeing. And this will help you manage and make decisions on your painting if you see it this way. So squint down, this is what you're trying to go for. And if we have this and we go low key, look at how simple that is. This is much more manageable than this. There's just too much information. So squint down, simplify. All right, now I'm going to get into the demo and show you how to get this stuff done. All right, let's get this party started. Here's my canvas. This is an oil-primed linen. Here is a value scale to kind of show me where I need to stay between value 5 and value 0. Again, there's the Munsell color or value system. So value 10 is white and 0 is pure black. So there's my black, raw umber, transparent oxide red, transparent oxide yellow, chromium oxide green, phthalo green, ultramarine blue, perylene red, cadmium yellow medium, I think, Naples yellow, and lead white. Just to preface, this lead white has a more subtle tinting strength than titanium white, but I don't have any titanium white on me, so I'm going to use lead white instead. So you're just going to have to bear with me. Now, just to summarize, what I'm going for is I want to compress the values between 0 and 5. But if I look at my still life, which I've shown image of it, the lightest value would be the plate or some of the highlights that are off of the metal object or the glass object. So between those 3, I think it's more the metal object that is off to the side here. And that value needs to only be a value 5 if that is my whitest white. And then my darkest dark is going to be behind the metal object, which would be 0.5 or 0, close to there. And everything else needs to fit within that value structure. Now, these values that I have as a reference are very, very compressed. There's not much of a difference at all. If I get just a true value 5, though, this is a true value 5, according to Munsell, and this is close to a value 0, but I'm able to get it just slightly darker with my ivory black. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to draw out my composition onto the canvas and then go from there. All right, I spent about 5 minutes on drawing this in. A couple things I want to point out. On all of my ellipses, I wanted to create a vertical and horizontal point on the widest point and the tallest and lowest point of the ellipse. So the distance between the bottom of the ellipse should be about the same as the top of the ellipse, and the side of the ellipse should be the same as the other side of the ellipse. I did that for this ellipse, the other one, and I didn't do it for this one, but it's a very shallow one. It's almost at eye level here, so it's going to be a little bit more flat. It's not completely flat, but a little bit flat. Same thing with this ellipse here. I just kind of free-handed it, but it stays, it's pretty accurate. So anyways, when you are working on ellipses, the main point that you want to remember is the widest point and the highest and lowest point is always going to be equal to this horizon line and this plumb line. So this distance needs to be the same as that distance, and this distance needs to be the same as that distance. If you follow that rule, you'll be able to nail it. The other thing is that's the highest and lowest point and widest point. And everything else just kind of softens and rounds into it. It doesn't just go straight, which you can draw things straight to give you a basic understanding of creating the ellipse, but make sure that you go back into it and round it off a little bit more. I'm going to paint over this, so it won't really make that much of a difference. All right. Now I'm going to go in and work on my poster study since I know what my composition is and I'm fine with it. It's not the best composition in the entire world. And I didn't put in all these little details. There's a little clasp that's right here. The reason why I don't put in all these details is because I will do those a little bit later. I figure why come in and paint it all when I'm just going to be painting over it anyways. Beyond that, shadow shapes have already been established. I forgot to do shadow shape here on the apple. And I will also divide this shape from this shape and that shape from that shape. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm just dividing where my light shapes versus my shadow shapes, where the dark ones versus the light ones. This kind of flattens off a little bit. I shouldn't say flatten off. There's an ellipse that's in there, but it's darker in value right there. This is all darker in value, and this is all darker in value. And right here is even darker in value, but it's not as dark as that value. So I'm separating the values because these shadow shapes, they're going to be so dark that I'm just going to flatten them out. Keep it simple. Focus on the light shapes. The background is also black or dark, so I will put in that background value, and I'm just going to be very direct and jump into it. In terms of the construction, I feel like I summarized it pretty good, but now it's a term of bracketing. So how about I start, and before I paint into everything, how about I bracket in my lightest light? And this is going to look funky because I have a white canvas, and I'm going to be putting paint on a white canvas. If it were a black canvas, then it would look different because the values would look relationship-wise more accurate. But because it's white, my lightest light is going to look really, really dark. So I'm going to mix up a value 5 here. And how I'm determining this is I'm squinting down. It needs to go just a little bit lighter. But I mean, that's it. I don't have to use very much white. It's awesome. Now, this lighter value is a bit too gray, so I'm going to take some raw umber, too blue. I'm going to take some raw umber and use that instead of the black. If I use the black, it's going to shift more towards the blue. If I use the raw umber, it's going to shift more towards neutral/orange. All right, let's see if that works. I'm testing this on the value that I have right there. Oh my goodness, that is so close. I'm rolling the paintbrush in my hand, so I'm getting both sides of the paintbrush on the mixture. Oh, just a little bit more. Everything else is going to be keyed in or darker than this value. Wow, that's looking so close. I'm just creeping up on the value. Creepy, creepy. That sounds creepy on the microphone. Don't want to be too creepy. Holy guacamole, look at that. Okay, this is my lightest value right here. That's it. It's not very light. It's much darker than what I have on the canvas, or my palette. So I'm going to take this lightest value and I'm going to put it right where the highlight is. Now it doesn't look like a highlight because it is way too dark in relation to the white of the canvas. But it'll all start to make sense. Now that I have this keyed in, I'm going to also put in that value 5 right about here. So that's going to be my value 5. I had a student tell me that they were really nervous on putting in these values and colors because they were afraid of getting it wrong. And I said, that's great. I'm glad you're afraid of getting it wrong because that means you should do it. You should paint it. If you don't paint it, and if you just stay in your head like, I'm going to get this wrong, maybe I shouldn't do it, then you're just going to stay in your head. You're actually not going to get much painting done. So I ask or tell my students, if you're afraid to do something with your painting, do it. Because if you don't do it, you'll just never know how it works out. Okay, that is my lightest value. Now I'm going to posterize all of these shapes with larger pools of value so that I can see the relationship of those values to other values. Basically just covering the white of the canvas because I don't want to look at the white of the canvas. Nothing on here is going to be white because I'm low key. As a side note, just a couple things I want to point out. I am double speeding the video here, so it's not much faster than real life. Oh, I guess it could be a little bit faster than real life. It is faster than real life. It's double the speed, okay? So I'm doubling the speed, but I'm not going to describe everything that I'm doing in these actual painting portions of the video. I want you to take away a couple of things. So if you watch this portion where I'm actually painting, I want you to be conscious of, if I don't have enough paint to fill in the space, what am I doing to make it so that it fills in the space better? Sometimes I'll thin it down with some oil or some mineral spirit so that it will stretch the paint application. The other thing that I want you to observe or look for is how I put my color mixtures together. Most of the time it's like I create a mother color is what it's called, where here I'm just putting in black in the background, which is totally fine. And now it's wet enough to be able to fill in a lot of those shapes in the background. Whereas my first couple of strokes, it was like, nope, that's not enough. I need to make it more wet. So make sure that you're doing the consistency. Anyways, back to the mother color. So if I start off with this black and then I start to build up lighter values, I will just lighten up a mixture of that mother color. So really look for how I'm mixing my colors together and also what colors I'm picking. I will shift between warm and cool. When you are this dark in value, it's hard to get some good high chromas. You can, it's possible. I tend to have a harder time seeing the right value or correct value with high chroma colors. I will neutralize them most of the time, and I feel like it creates a better mood instead of like, bam, in your face. Look at that color. It's too much. It's too obnoxious, too gaudy, garish. Anyways, I just don't dig it. Look for simple placement of color and value. Also the mixtures, how I'm mixing them. What does it look like on my palette? Do I go back and forth and look and match the values in relationship to my mixture on the value scale that I have right next to the painting? Another important thing to understand, I usually don't paint with a lot of vertical brush strokes, but in order to make it visible from this camera angle, I did a lot of vertical brush strokes. That makes it easier for you to be able to see the correct hue, value, and chroma. But in reality, I will do lots of different brush strokes in lots of different areas, like what I just did there on the under part of the plate. It was a horizontal stroke instead of a vertical stroke. but sometimes they get lost. And to reiterate and or show you that I have placed in a correct value, I will do vertical brush strokes so that I don't get that glare off of the window. All right, now I have covered the entire canvas with paint, right? So the white of the canvas is back there. Now I've compressed my values. I've not gone lighter than a value 5. I kept on testing it, even with the different colors. So mostly with this green, the egg is kind of a yellowish, peachy color. But anyways, this is going to be more of a yellow hue. This will be more of a green hue. This is also green. It's more of a blue green, so I need to shift that. But once I have all of my colors and values placed on the canvas, I can better see value relationships and color relationships better. For example, if I want to, I know that it goes from the highlight of this jar, it goes cool, and then it goes warm, and then it goes cool again. But these value shifts are just a little bit off. In order to make this look like a highlight, I need to compress these values even more. And the nice thing is, I used a transparent oxide yellow here to be able to get that color. And it's semi-transparent, so I would want to let it dry or go more opaque to be able to make it look like this is a highlight, because I can't get lighter than this. I've constrained my values. This is as light as it's going to get. That's why I painted this white plate this dark of a value, because it needs to look that way in relationship to everything else. Now, another side note, in the camera, because of the angle, and my light is coming from this angle, I did a lot of vertical brush strokes to get rid of any highlights that you might see. But there is a nice highlight that is right underneath here for the egg. You'll just have to believe me that it's the correct value that's underneath this egg. It's just hard to see because you're seeing the light bouncing off of the ridges of the brush stroke. All right, now over to the glass. The glass is pretty simple. I think painting glass is pretty easy. All you need to do is put in a slightly darker version of whatever it's reflecting in the glass and also from the light source. Now, I took the lightest value and put it right there because there's a whitish highlight there from my window. And in order to get that value to stand out more, I need to darken the value of the foreground a little bit more. So this needs to be darker than the plate. And right now it's pretty close. I mean, parts are darker, but it's pretty close to the same value as the plate. But to make that plate look white, I have to darken everything else down. The other complex thing that's coming into play is I'm already starting to get set in on my black. And that's because I use some mineral spirits to thin it out to be able to brush it on there and fill in the shapes pretty quickly. The other downside of using mineral spirits is that it thins it down a lot. So it's going to evaporate and cure quicker because of the mineral spirits. It just evaporates a lot quicker than oil paint. And oil paint doesn't evaporate, it cures. But either way, so what I need to do is I need to start to go in and redefine my value structure since I have everything placed on there. This apple needs to be lighter than what's going on around it. Same thing with this egg. The egg, I won't be able to make it much lighter. So what I think I'm going to do is darken these values a little bit more, but keep the cool and warm change between the two, more of an orange and a gray. Same thing with the glass. I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to change this green to be more of a blue green so that the color relationships are more accurate. And then this foreground, I'm just going to darken. The still life is just right here. Right there, off to the left. So the still life, I'm able to look at the still life and at my painting at the same time and go back and forth. So I hope this summary helps out. But because I have a good established beginning right now I can jump in and start to refine some things. Okay, just to summarize this whole thing up, I had to finish the plate and the metal cup and the glass after my first sitting. So first part of this video was about an hour and a half into the painting, and then I had to let it dry or cure because I had to run and get some things done. And anyways, came back about 24 hours later, and it was dry enough in some areas because I used raw umber to be able to go back in and refine some things. So the things that I pushed in the refinement was contrast in color. So I went more with this ultramarine blue here. So it would contrast the orange, the reddish orange that is in here, the transparent oxide red, and also refine some of the shapes. Notice I didn't get too much lighter in terms of these little specular highlights that are coming off of the metal, and also the specular highlights in the glass. So I put those in last, and I get students asking me all the time, how do you paint glass? You paint glass by not painting glass. As soon as you go in and you start to fill it all in with a separate value than what is in the background, you start to lose that transparency in the glass. So I really look for the abstract shapes. So here's a much darker value that is curving around. This is a reflection of the apple in the glass. This is also a reflection of the apple in the glass because the angle of the light that's bouncing off of the apple. And then here is just a little bit more opacity. So I did what I call scumbling, where you take the brush and you just kind of dry brush it across. I wasn't filling in everything. I was just using a little bit more of a blue to go on top of that so that I am providing contrast in color like I did in the metal with the glass. The plate is also doing the same type of thing. It has a contrast of blue versus the warm orange color that is in there. I pushed it just a little bit more to make it look like there was more depth in the painting instead of just painting exactly what I saw. And now obviously I'm not painting exactly what I saw. I'm keeping within value 5 and 0. I might have jumped up to a 5.5, maybe with some of these little specular highlights. But either way, I'm trying to keep that harmony of value compressed and close together. With light key, it would be the same exact example where you're painting a lighter version of this, value 5 to 10, and as soon as you get into those higher ranges, the colors start to become diluted. Same thing with these darker value ranges. I had a lot more colors that I could have used. I could have used a little bit more reds, like perylene, but then I would really have to fight against the chroma. So I try to keep it relatively neutral with my colors. So I had more of a yellowish reds and blues. And also I really flattened out the values in the shadows. It's not important to get a lot of detail in the shadows, especially when you're this dark in value. It's more important to see the relationship of those values and colors and try to express them accurately within their compressed value set. So the plate, I'm looking at like a value 5, 4, and maybe even a 3 in some of these areas. The table, the background is definitely like a 0.5, but it's setting in, so it's getting lighter in value. When I varnish it, it'll go much darker and express the contrast between this foreground and the background. And this foreground area here is about a value 2, possibly even a value 3, but because it is warmer in relationship to the blue, it reads as if it is a separate object. The glass is the same type of thing, simple brush strokes, softening out some of those forms, hardening some of those edges on some of those forms. Same thing with metal objects, soft versus hard-edged, and also change in color. So metal reflects its environment. Down here I have these colors placed in there, and then the blues are also placed in other areas in the composition. So it creates a sense of harmony between all the objects. The things that you can learn from this, even though you're compressing your values, you still don't have a lot of chroma meaning really saturated areas to be able to work in those dark values. So they tend to compress into more of a natural tonal arrangement instead of a highly chromatic arrangement. When you do high key, the issue is the same type of thing. You can actually keep the hue correct, but it's hard to make the chroma as high as what you're actually seeing because it's too light in value. The more you can stay in these middle values, the easier it's going to be able to get the right hue, value, and chroma. Sargent, Alma Tadema, there lots of different artists would keep almost all of their paintings in this range here in the middle, would rarely jump into this light and to this dark, maybe to have accents or really turn form or have a specular highlight, they might go that light. But if you look at most of Rembrandt's paintings, they are like this value set. It's crazy how dark they are. Maybe they would get a little bit lighter, but it has a good sense of mood to it, a nice dark filter onto it. All right, I hope this was informative. If not, then that sucks, and I'm sorry for you that it wasn't as informative as you hoped it would be, I guess. All right, anyways, have an excellent day.